mentioned to you that have been ordered and are available will not be delivered until the students return to school. End of story.
Setting back education.
Mr. Secretary.
All right, no, you just.
Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Ministry Paper number 58, entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues, dated 29 June 2020. Ministry Paper number 59, Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone Social Intervention, as at August 9, 2020. Ministry Paper number 60, Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Greenwich Town Community Zone Social Intervention, as at August 9, 2020. Ministry Paper number 61, Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, August Town Community Social Intervention, as at August 9, 2020. Ministry Paper number 62, Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Mount Salem Community Zones Social Intervention, September 1, 2017 to August 7, 2020. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Greenwich Tower Zone, extension of period of operation, Order 2020. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Greenwich Town Zone, extension of period of operation, Order 2020, Resolution. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, August Town Zone, extension of period of Order 2020. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, August Town Zone, extension of period of operation, Order 2020, Resolution. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation, Number 4, Order 2020. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation, Number 4, Order 2020, Resolution. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation, Number 4, Order 2020. Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation, Number 4, Order 2020, Resolution. Annual Report of the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica for the year 2017-2018. Annual Report of the Micro Investment Development Agency Limited, MIDA, for the 2018-2019 period. Emergency Powers Number 2, Continuance Number 2, Revocation Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Emergency Powers 2019, Continuance Number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Emergency Powers Number 3, 2019, Continuance Number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Emergency Powers Number 2, 2019, Continuance Number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act. Emergency Powers Continuance Number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act.
Bills brought from the Senate.
following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable House of Representatives that on the 24th day of July 2020, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Special Economic Zones Act was passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Vincent, CDQCJP, President of the Senate. Oh, my apologies. Signed by Senator Thomas Tavares Vincent, CDQCJP, ON.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motion given orally, question and answers to question, notices of motion given orally.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can I get... I beg to give notice that the next meeting of the House I will move the following motions. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Augusttown Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Order 2020 Resolution. Whereas Section 4 of the Law Reform Zone of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017 Whereas Section 4 of the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Act measures, they are hereinafter referred to as the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council may by order declare any geographically defined area within a single continuous boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operations for a period of not exceeding 60 days if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence and murder and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Augusttown Zone, Order 2020. And whereas that order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the said period for such further periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 10th day of August 2020, the Prime Minister and Council made the law reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Augusttown Zone, Extension of Period Operation Order 2020. Now therefore be resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the law reform, Zones of Special Operation, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Augusttown Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Order 2020 Resolution, the law reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Augusttown Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Order 2020 is hereby affirmed. The law reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 4, Order 2020 Resolution. Whereas Section 4 of the law reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Act 2017, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Prime Minister in Council may, by order, declare any geographically defined area within a single continuous boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operations for a period not exceeding 60 days if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence, and murder and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, declaration of the Denham Town Community Zone number 2 Order 2017. And whereas that order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives extend the said period for such further periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 10th day of August 2020, the Prime Minister and Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation number 4, Order 2020, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation number 4, Order 2020 resolution. The law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Denham Town Community Zone, extension of period of operation number 4, Order 2020 is hereby affirmed. Third, the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Greenwich Town Zone, extension of period of operation, Order 2020 resolution. Whereas Section 4 of the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Act 2017, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Prime Minister in the Council may, by order, declare any geographically defined area within a single continuous boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operations for a period not exceeding 60 days, if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence and murder, and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Greenwich Town Zone, Order 2020. And whereas that order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command made by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the said period for such further periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 10th day of August 2020, the Prime Minister and Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Greenwich Town Zone, extension of period of operation, Order 2020, now therefore be resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Greenwich Town Zone, extension of period of operation, Order 2020 resolution. The law reform, zones of special operation, special security and community development measures, the Greenwich Town Zone, extension of period of operation 2020 is hereby affirmed. The law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem community and environs in the parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation number 4, Order 2020 resolution. Whereas Section 4 of the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Act 2017, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Prime Minister in Council may, by order, declare any geographically defined area within a single continuous boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operation for a period not exceeding 60 days, if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence, and murder and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the Spanish of St. James Zone, Order 2017. And whereas the order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order subject to the affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the said period for such further periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 10th day of August 2020, the Prime Minister in Council made the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation, number 4, Order 2020. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation number 4, Order 2020 resolution. 2, the law reforms zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Mount Salem Community and Environs in the parish of St. James Zone, extension of period of operation number 4, Order 2020 is hereby affirmed. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Questions and answer to questions.
No. Dave, not others. Yeah.
Prime Minister.
At notices of motions, I suspect you're still at that point, Mr. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following 5 motions. In a sense, I too am relieved. The advice is that because these are such important documents that they have to be literally read into the record individually. So bear with me. The Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 30th day of April 2019, the Governor-General by a proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the entire area comprising the parishes of St. James, Hanover and Westmoreland, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas under the provisions of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community, and whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Regulation 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the entire area comprising the parishes of St. James, Hanover and Westmoreland during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Regulation 2019 were laid in the Senate on the 3rd day of May 2019 and in the House of Representatives on the 7th day of May 2019, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of September 2020, and whereas it is provided by Section 23C of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section may be revoked at any time by a resolution supported by the votes of a 2/3 majority of the members of each House. And whereas it is desirable that the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned shall end on the 17th day of August 2020, and the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 be revoked upon the ending of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. The resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance Number 3 Revocation Resolution 2020 with effect from the 17th day of August 2020. The following are revoked. A. The Emergency Powers 2019 Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2020. B. The proclamation made by the Governor-General on the 8th day of April 2019. And C. The Emergency Powers Regulations 2019. The Emergency Powers Number 2 2019 Continuance Number 3 Revocation Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety, and whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 7th day of July 2019, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parish of St. Andrew as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and hereinafter referred to as a specified community, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3.1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community, and whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3.1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3.4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2019 were laid in the Senate on the 12th day of July 2019 and in the House of Representatives on the 16th day of July 2019. And whereas it was resolved by the Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of September 2020. And whereas it is provided for Section 23C of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section may be revoked at any time by a resolution supported by the votes of a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned shall end on the 17th day of August 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2019 be revoked upon the ending of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers No. 2 2019 Continuance No. 3 Revocation Resolution 2020, and 2. With effect from the 17th day of August 2020, the following are revoked. A. The Emergency Powers No. 2 2019 Continuance No. 3 Resolution 2020, and B. The proclamation made by the Governor-General on the 77th day of July 2019, and C. The Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2019. The Emergency Powers No. 3 2019 Continuance No. 3 Revocation Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 21(1) and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 5th day of September 2019, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the entire area comprising the parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months as both Houses of Parliament may determine by resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in place for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas under the provision of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers No. 3 Regulations 2019 for securing the essentials of life to the entire area comprising the parishes of Clarendon and St. Catherine during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers No. 3 Regulations 2019 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 10th day of September 2019 and in the Senate on the 13th day of September 2019, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of September 2020. And whereas it is provided by Section 23C of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section may be revoked at any time by a resolution supported by the votes of a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned shall end on the 17th day of August 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers Number 3 Regulations 2019 be revoked upon ending of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Number 3 2019 Continuance Number 3 Revocation Resolution 2020 with effect from the 17th day of August 2020. The following are revoked. A. The Emergency Powers Number 3 2019 Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2020, and B. The proclamation made by the Governor General on the 5th day of September 2019, and C. The Emergency Powers Number 3 Regulations 2019. The Emergency Powers Continuance Number 3 Revocation Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 26th day of January 2020, the Governor General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew, as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and herein after referred to as a specified community, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas under the provisions of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Regulation 2020 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers 2020 regulations were laid in the House of Representatives on the 28th day of January 2020 and in the Senate on the 30th day of January 2020. And whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of September 2020. And whereas it is provided by Section 23C of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section may be revoked at any time by a resolution supported by the votes of a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is desirable that the state I only need one spirit to speak. No. And whereas it is desirable that the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned shall end on the 17th day of August 2020, and the Emergency Powers Regulation 2020 be revoked upon the ending of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows, This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Continuance Number 3 Revocation Resolution 2020. And 2, with effect from the 17th day of August 2020, the following are revoked. A, the Emergency Powers Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2020. B, the proclamation made by the Governor-General by the 26th day of January 2020. And C, the Emergency Powers Regulation 2020. Final resolution. The Emergency Powers Number 2 Continuance Number 2 Revocation Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed, and as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 14th day of June 2020, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew, as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and hereinafter referred to as the specified community, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2020 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives, providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2020 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 16th day of June 2020 and in the Senate on the 19th day of June, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency, as aforementioned, remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of September 2020, and whereas it is provided by Section 23C of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section may be revoked at any time by a resolution supported by the votes of a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned shall end on the 17th day of August 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2020 be revoked upon the ending of the state of emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Number 2 Continuance Number 2 Revocation Resolution 2020. And 2, with effect from the 17th day of August 2020, the following are revoked. A, the Emergency Powers Number 2 Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2020. B, the proclamation made by the Governor-General on the 14th day of June 2020. And C, the Emergency Powers Number 2 Regulations 2020. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Question and answers to question. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, note of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it. Dr. Chang.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, disrupting crime, violence, and corruption remain a top priority of this government. These criminal acts have direct implications on Jamaica's socio-economic development. They have created unease and fear among our citizens in several communities across the island. Undoubtedly, we are all affected by the effects of crime in one way or the other. The driving factors behind this crime epidemic are decades old. They have been compounded by gang feuds, transnational criminal activity, cyber crimes, advanced credit fraud, otherwise called lotto scamming, and the drugs for going straight, to name a few. All of this has culminated into a national crisis that has reached epidemic proportions. Mr. Speaker, we have always maintained that these high levels of crime and violence warrant equally robust, comprehensive, and extraordinary solutions. We recognize from the outset that the old conventional approaches failed to consider the systemic and deep-rooted nature of crime and violence in Jamaica. The approach implemented by this government has moved well beyond conventional response. It has strengthened policy directives with the requisite legislative and regulatory parameters, bolstered institutional capacity, garnered public support for law enforcement, and most importantly, focused on social transformation at the community level. We have established and employed the kind of strategies that will bring about sustainable crime reduction and long-standing transformation. This new approach also saw the significant expansion of investment in the security forces. This government has prioritized spending on security. Through Plan Secure Jamaica, we continue to implement strategic changes to the national security architecture. This has included the acquisition of the high-quality equipment and resources, infrastructural and technology improvements, expansion of the scientific, forensic, and ballistic capabilities of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and the development of human capital. Undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker, this approach requires more than the efforts of the public sector. While the provision of safety and security is a key feature of a responsible government, this approach also relies on meaningful partnership with the private sector and civil society to meet the current challenges. I am encouraged by the support and commitment of every Jamaican on this issue. There has been an emerging consensus on the approach to crime and violence in Jamaica. We have seen this interplay in Parliament and even more recently with the signing of the agreement on the National Consensus on Crime, signaling the right intent and positive direction towards an inclusive commitment. And finally, though not exhaustive, the new approach requires a stronger sense of citizenship from all Jamaicans. Citizenship security requires a commitment to responsible statehood and proactive individual and community contributions in achieving public safety. Without this, the efforts of the JCF and the JDF, which cumulatively comprise less than 1% of the country's population, will in fact fail. Mr. Speaker, this government has embarked on and is pursuing several initiatives to ensure that improving citizen security and public safety becomes a reality. And while there is an eagerness for quick wins and immediate results, the country's security fraternity is more significantly being steered towards the pursuit of those measures that will deliver long-term societal transformation. Just this morning, I launched a pilot of the handheld ticketing solution that will significantly improve the efficiency of our traffic ticket management system. This solution eliminates the inefficiencies that have been caused by the manual paper-based ticketing system. It will significantly impact on improved public order and public safety going forward. This will provide additional confidence to the motoring public that we're improving public order on our roadways, and certainly to the average citizen seeing the improved order, there's certainly an increase in confidence in law and in the guarantee of peace and safety. The law reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Act 2017, was designed to address the root of these problems I mentioned earlier. As a government, we have been making firm steps, and the people of Jamaica are showing greater acceptance of this initiative. In keeping with this commitment, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking this Honourable House to unite in approving the extension of the Zones of Special Operations in the communities of Mount Salem, Denham Town, Greenwich Town, and August Town. A quick review of the Zones of Special Operations. Mr. Speaker, acting on the advice of the National Security Council and in accordance with the Section 5 of the law reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act, the Prime Minister and Council, after consultation with the Joint Command made by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the period referred to in Section 4.3. It is being recommended that the Denham Town, Mount Salem, Greenwich Town, and August Town Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures be extended for a further period of 60 days to 20 October 2020, 9th of November 2020, 31st of October 2020, and 7th of November 2020, respectively. Mr. Speaker, the ministry papers which have been distributed provide an overview of activities within the zone. Both the Mount Salem and Denham Town zones are currently being pursued within the build phase of the strategy, while the Greenwich Town and August Town zones are in the clear phase, which will see the work of the security forces taking primacy at this phase of the strategy. This does not exclude the work of the special social agents within the space, as the Social Intervention Committee for both the Greenwich Town and August Town communities concluded their first meetings on the 15th of July 2020. Mr. Speaker, the committees include a wide cross-section of stakeholders, and they'll be working with the communities on joint force to further develop the community priorities and synchronize the various mechanisms of the government of Jamaica to create the platform for sustained development and sustainable improvement in law and order. In previous addresses, we have noted that the zones will be strategically aligned to the city security plan for Jamaica. At the institutional level, a technical monitoring, evaluation, and learning mechanism will be established to provide the necessary evidence to measure the results obtained and learn from the experiences. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the plan will unfold in successive phases to progressively increase the number of beneficiary communities. The first two zones have taught us some lessons, and while some activities described in the Citizen Security Plan have already been piloted in the communities of Denham Town and Mount Salem, these will now be expanded to Greenwich Town and August Town. It is anticipated that with additional resources, more communities will benefit from this initiative. But in fact, just pause to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, we will not dilute the approach in any way not to reach more communities. We will ensure that we discuss with the Ministry of Finance and look for the relevant requisite resources to ensure that we can execute the zones of special operations as outlined in the plan's City Security Plan. Mr. Speaker, successes in these years have also been manifested by an overall lower crime rate. In fact, in the case of Mount Salem, there continues to be no recorded case of murders or shootings since the declaration of the zone. Likewise, as at 6th of August 2020, and since the declaration of the August Town and Greenwich Town zones of special operation, there have been no murders and shooting in the borders of these areas. Additionally, since the declaration of the zones of special operation in the Denham Town community, murder and shootings have been significantly reduced by 35% and 60% respectively. Mr. Speaker, we remain committed to saving lives under the vision of achieving a safe and secure Jamaica. A deviation from these measures that have proven successful would be a deviation from this vision. We therefore ask for further commitment to this process, which has as its greatest stakeholder the citizens of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, as we align the strategic priority with the vision for this country, we believe we have sufficiently justified the need for a continuation of the zones of special operations. Mr. Speaker, I now move that the motion of notice which I gave earlier be approved.
Those in favor? Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, the opposition has been consistent in its support for the zones of special operation since their inception in 2017. In fact, there are now 4 in operations, the last 2 just in the recent few months. We had the first in Denham Town, and in Mount Salem, then in Denham Town, and August Town last, and before that, Greenwich Town. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the House that the zones of special operations have 2 critical components: security and social intervention. And when the legislation was being promulgated, it's a recognition that without effective and consistent social intervention, you are not going to have the kind of reduction that you need. And so I am using this opportunity to remind the government of that critical element. But importantly, Mr. Speaker, you'll recall in the previous debates, the Minister of National Security gave the undertaking that we will, at least I would, and others, not exclusive to myself, be provided with the detailed crime statistics. For some miraculous reason, the government feels that the least we know is the safer we are going to become. Since June 27th of this year, in the weekly crime stats that provided a substantial amount of information about, in each division, police division, it tells you how much ammunition is recovered, how much guns are recovered, division by division. Those detailed information to assess where we are now left to only believe what the government tells you. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is not something that any of us will find comfort in. To make the point further, Mr. Speaker, the last weekly stats published shows that up to Sunday evening, there was 784 murders compared to the previous year, 2019, of 807. Now that would reflect a reduction of 23. And then there is a 2.9% reduction. Since June 27th, the undetermined deaths no longer is reported. And that 65 has just disappeared from the reporting. If you add that 65 up to then, assuming that there's no more, the annual statistics would give you 849 and not 784, which reflects a 5.2 increase over last year and not a 2.9 reduction as the quote-unquote official data would tell us. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that we are in a worse situation than we were this time last year. In fact, up to last month, the House will recall I indicated it is 6,300 persons that have lost their lives from murderers. That is the fact of the situation. So, Minister, I make an appeal to you to provide the information that you have promised this House before, so that when we are called upon to support motions brought before this House, it can be on the basis of information and complete information, because the information we're talking about does not compromise the operation of the security forces in no way whatsoever. And the question is why it has been deliberately suppressed. So I make my appeal to you, Minister, to make good on the promise that you have made before and to make that available. I've asked the JSA for it, and there's just fumbling and no response. It's promised, it's not delivered. In respect of the Zozo, as I indicate, we offer no objection to the motion before us.
Mr. Speaker, just for clarification, the data provided is provided by the Jamaica Constabulary Force, not the government of Jamaica per se, and not the political directorate as such. I get the same data he will receive on a weekly basis if he hasn't been getting. The same data I get, and we are at the same, well, for this word, we are still 3% below last year, and I am confident in the quality of the data given. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the number of undetermined deaths have been pretty much steady over the number of years. Last year, the year before, the same thing. Some of those cases, once the pathologists do their report and the cause of death is identified, then they are introduced in the system. Some may, in fact, be homicides, and they keep being introduced on an intermittent basis, or there may be other natural causes, whatever the cause may be. It would be inappropriate to include the undetermined deaths as part of the statistics for the police cases. All deaths, in fact, that are all sudden deaths are considered police cases until the pathologists do their pathology report. And as I said, on a serial basis, the numbers, will remain on the system, and when they get the report at the end of the week, some are taken off and included. That's why you remain at the well. That's not why you do, but it remains within the statistics that are summarized. If you do it on a daily basis, it creates the wrong impression, and that's why the police have taken them out of the daily operation. But undetermined deaths is what they are, undetermined. It cannot be classified as homicides until determined, and the pathology reports decide that, and the final diagnosis. I think we need to inform the public appropriately and discuss it and record it accurately. Undetermined deaths are undetermined until decided by the pathology report, and some of them will in fact join the homicide list, others will go to other causes that are determined. That, Mr. Speaker, and I assure you, if you have not received the weekly analysis, which I get I think usually on a Monday morning, I will certainly ensure it's correct, but I'm assured it is being sent to you. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the adoption of the resolution.
Members, we are putting the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I believe the notices speak for themselves and that I don't need to convince the other side to support it. Indeed, they are here in their numbers at this hour, precisely so to do. Mr. Speaker, I know that Jamaicans are concerned, but that is really a euphemism. Jamaicans are indeed worried that with the revocation of the orders for states of public emergency, which have been very effective in controlling crime and in particularly murders, that there could be another spike in murders in the country. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the commitment made regarding elections, I am now asking the House to consider and vote on the motion for the revocation. I did reach out to the leader of the opposition to determine whether or not we could consider going beyond nomination day, but the prevailing view of members opposite is that the period should not go beyond nomination day. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am now placing the motion to have the states of public emergency all come to an end on the 17th day of August 2020.
Mr. Speaker, we certainly are all agreed that the motions before us should be supported. I think it is important for me to say that we all share the concern in relation to the prevalence of violent crimes and murders in particular in the country. And perhaps where we do differ is on the notion of the actual success of the states of emergency over the period. Because in fact, and I believe that it is generally acknowledged in the country and probably most symbolized by the recent signing of a consensus between government, opposition, and the stakeholders with respect to an approach to overcoming the threat of crime and violence in the country last week, that there was always need for a much more wide-ranging, comprehensive approach to the whole question of criminal violence. As it is now, the government the numbers report a 2% or so reduction in crimes in murders compared to last year. But the fact of the matter is that if you look at the period since 2016 till now, and compare it with the period of 2012 to 2015, it's in excess of 1,000 murders more that have resulted, and there were no states of emergency. I think that shows that we can do better without necessarily sacrificing the rights of citizens along the way. What I would want to see accompanying this decision that we are taking today is that there be very real measures to address the situation, particularly in those police divisions. 8 of the 19 police divisions report serious increases in murders. And I know that it is not beyond the capability of the security forces to address the specific issues in those areas, driven by a concept of intelligence-led policing, identifying not only the hotspots, but the perpetrators, either actual or likely perpetrators in these areas. I think it is important for me to state also that as recently, I believe, as Independence Day, the Prime Minister and myself exchanged words, and we both agreed then that it was not desirable to have a state of emergency in place during the election period. And I think that there are many good reasons for that, quite apart from the substantive reasons that have caused us to express our concerns about the state of emergency, states of emergency. But fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, the citizens of the country need to have no doubt regarding any action taken by our security forces during an election period, nor any suspicion, valid or suspected or presumed, that any action by any member of the security forces has any ulterior political motive. It doesn't have to be so, but merely the suspicion of it being so could drive a lot of disorder. Your memory goes far back. You were a little boy, but a dangerous one. But nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, we support the resolutions before us for the ending of the states of emergency on 17th of August, 2020.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, just briefly to say that in planning for all of this, the security forces have measures already in place. In fact, they had already, as they call it, game planned the entire operations. So though the states of emergency will not be in existence, the police and the military will be fully mobilized, but under different operational modalities. And we will use at our disposal all the tools given to us by the law to ensure that Jamaican citizens are protected and feel safe in their country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I commend the vote to the House.
Sorry. Emergency Power 2019 continuance. Number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020. The Emergency Power number 2, 2019 continuance. Number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020. The Emergency Power number 3, 2019 continuance. Number 3, Resolution 2020. The Emergency Power continuance number 3, Revocation Resolution 2020, and the Emergency Power number 2, continuance number 2, Revocation Resolution 2020 be approved. Members, we can C2 take all 5 as one, for one vote? We are going to then ask members to answer your name as a vote for or against. So the clerk will proceed. Is those in favor?
Okay, ready to vote? Mr. R. Scott? No, ayes and
You have
noes.
to, members, you'll have to listen to your name in order to vote.
We're voting ayes and noes. Mr. R. Scott? Mr. Azan? Mr. Bartlett? Mr. Dave Brown? Dr. Brownberg? Mr. Buchanan? Mr. Bunting? Dr. Campbell? Dr. Dayton Campbell? Mr. Leslie Campbell? Dr. Chang? Mr. Pernell Charles Jr., Mr. Chuck, Mr. Heroy Clark, Dr. Nigel Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn. She left. She can't. Miss Daly. Miss Daly. Mr. Daly. Mr. Daly. Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert. Dr. Dunn. Mr. Fagan. Dr. Ferguson. Mr. Golding. Ms. Grange. Mr. Floyd Green. Dr. Guy. Ms. Hannah. She's not here. Mr. Hales. Mr. Hales. I can't hear. Is Mr. Hales answering? No. Absent. Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry. Mr. Holness. Mrs. Holness. Absent. Mr. Hutchinson. Mr. Hilton. Mr. Jackson. Mr. Kellier. Mrs. Malahoo Ford. Mr. Main. Mr. Mackenzie. Dr. McNeil. Dr. McNeil. Mr. Montague. Ms. Nito. Mr. Paulwell. Mr. Michael Phillips. Dr. Phillips. Mr. Pickersgill. Mr. Redmond. Mr. Robertson. You're there. Mr. Robinson. Mr. Samuda. Mr. Shaw. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Shaw. Yeah, okay. Mr. Terry Long. Reverend Thwaites. Is absent. Dr. Tufton? Mrs. Vaz? He voted.
Members, we are taking the vote.
Okay. Mrs. Vaz? Mr. Daryl Vaz? Mr. Dwayne Vaz? Mr. Warmington? Dr. Wheatley? Dr. Wheatley? No. Mrs. Williams? Mr. Witter? Oh. Mr. Wright? Mr. Wright? I can't hear him. Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
On the record. Can you go down the record?
Members, we have 5 resolutions of similar nature, and the House can authorize that we vote on one resolution representing all 5. The decision is going to take one resolution. I will announce the decision. 54 yes, 8 absent. The motion is carried on all 5 resolutions. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the recommittal of statement by ministers.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Statement by Minister. Prime Minister.
Our Constitution gives a government 5 years as a term of office, with the provision for the term to be briefly extended in the event of emergency circumstances. It also gives the government the ability to seek a mandate from the people whenever it sees it necessary. Mr. Speaker, I now see it necessary to seek another mandate from the people of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, this government
Let's have some order, please.
is not unmindful of the public debate that has surrounded the calling of an election. This government believes firmly in modernizing the institutions of our democracy. In calling the election at this time, this government is not being unusual in practice. In fact, Mr. Speaker, most governments have called the elections before the due date. Mr. Speaker, we continue, however, as the government, to maintain our aspirations towards a fixed election date. We, Mr. Speaker, even took a paper to this House. Mr. Speaker, there are, however, legal and constitutional considerations which have arisen. And, Mr. Speaker, we remain committed to pursuing this. Mr. Speaker, this government has been in office for approximately 4 years and 6 months. I cannot recall there being a government before that has enjoyed the sustained approval ratings since this government so late in our term, and even after facing an extensive crisis of the nature of a pandemic. It is not a figment of public relations. It is as a result of the collective hard work of the people of Jamaica, effective leadership of its government, and the guarding and guiding hand of our eternal Father. Mr. Speaker, this government abolished the minimum business tax put on by that government. This government abolished the asset tax put on by that government. We abolished the ad valorem stamp duty on real estate and financial transactions. We slashed transfer tax on real estate transactions. We increased the GCT threshold for small businesses from 3 million to 10 million. We introduced for the first time a $350,000 MSME tax credit. Mr. Speaker, we increased the income tax threshold to 1.5 million when they said it couldn't be done. Mr. Speaker, most Jamaicans alive today would have lived through an era of high interest rates, where if there were any movement, it would be up in interest rates. Mr. Speaker, this government, under good leadership and administration, interest rates, Mr. Speaker, were reduced 10 times since 2018, leading to the lowest levels of interest rates for mortgages and consumer loans in the history of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, one of the proudest moments of this government, and certainly for the Minister of Tourism, we introduced the Tourism Workers' Pension Scheme, giving 100,000 tourism workers the opportunity to earn a pension. Mr. Speaker, we broaden the ownership of the economy, with 30,000 Jamaicans becoming shareholders of Wigton and Trans-Jamaica Highway. We reduced the rate of GCT by 1.5%. Mr. Speaker, under this government, Jamaica experienced the lowest level of unemployment in the history of the recording of the statistics. Mr. Speaker, under this government, the consumers and fixed income earners enjoyed the most stable period of low inflation in Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, this government went through difficult times, but by virtue of the policies that we put in place, we were able to see a 40% reduction in poverty in Jamaica. Lowest levels in 20 years. 10 years. Mr. Speaker, this economy grew for 18 consecutive quarters, 14 of which were under this government. That's the longest consecutive stretch of quarterly economic growth since we started measuring quarterly growth in 1997, this administration. Mr. Speaker, we implemented the HOPE program. 26,000 Jamaican youths got a second chance through apprenticeship-type programs. Mr. Speaker, the Heart NSTA Trust saw 146,000 Jamaicans being trained. And one program, Mr. Speaker, that I'm particularly proud of, the National Service Corps. We have seen over 2,000 Jamaican youngsters being exposed to training through the Jamaica Defence Force. Mr. Speaker, roads, 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 bridges, bridges. Mr. Speaker, a new term has been introduced into the vernacular, coined by the Minister of Finance, carpet. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, when you go to 3 miles, Mr. Speaker, the member's cry is more a reflection of his stewardship than the government. Mr. Speaker, when you look at Blackfield, when you look at Hagley Park Road, when you look at 3 miles, Mr. Speaker, when you go to Constant Spring, Mr. Speaker, all you can see is improvement in the infrastructure of this country. Mr. Speaker, we have many projects, but I want to point out one. Port Royal, Mr. Speaker, sat there for many years. Valuable historical asset, which we just look at it, Mr. Speaker. We just look at it and didn't do anything with it. Administrations come and administrations go. This government took it on, put in a plan, executed the plan, and now, Mr. Speaker, we can boast that we have a cruise ship here in Port Royal. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the South Coast Highway for St. Thomas and Portland, work has begun. Where is the member from St. Thomas Eastern? He, if he were able to stand, would give testimony of how effective that has been in his constituency, giving hope to the people. So, Mr. Speaker, I made 2 commitments before I decided that it was time. Because, Mr. Speaker, for me, it is never about power, title, or personal aggrandizement. I consider it, Mr. Speaker, a great honor and indeed a privilege to be able to serve as Prime Minister of the people of Jamaica. And so what was in the forefront of my mind, Mr. Speaker, when we faced the crisis of the pandemic, was to ensure that the Jamaican people were safe and protected. Mr. Speaker, I don't have to say how hard this government works. To ensure that we were able to, at this stage, have in place the measures necessary to manage the pandemic, to balance lives and livelihood. Mr. Speaker, we have always maintained that Mr. Speaker, we have always maintained that the government of Jamaica cannot do it by itself. Overcoming the pandemic has to be done together as a team with the government and its people. Every citizen has a duty to act responsibly. Mr. Speaker, we have put in place additional measures which have been gazetted. One of those measures can be used to exemplify the challenge we face. Mr. Speaker, we were just about to give the tourism industry another step up in the management of the pandemic, in allowing tourists on the resilient corridor to be able to go to attractions. With this recent outbreak, a part of the measures that we have to put in place would be to temporarily prevent that from happening so that we can have a sterile period of time to observe the spread of the virus nationally. And this is not something that we want to do. This is not something that we take any pleasure in doing, but it exemplifies the challenge in managing the pandemic. If we don't balance health and if we don't have our citizens acting responsibly, it has an impact on our economy. I toured some areas last week and I met a very articulate young man. And he pointed out to me that he is a worker in the tourism industry. He drives one of the tour buses. And he pointed out to me that he understands why the government has to close operations. And he says he's looking to now drive a taxi because he's not going to turn to crime. He understands he is going to find an alternative. And there are many Jamaicans, Mr. Speaker, like that, who have been terribly affected by the pandemic. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that they are suffering quietly, many of them. Their mortgages are falling due. The banks are calling to repossess their vehicles. as a government, it can't be about our political power. It has to be about ensuring that we keep people safe and we recover the economy. That is what it is. What has happened, Mr. Speaker, in all of this is that even if we had a fixed election date, once there is election fever in the air, then within the context of contested elections in a democracy, you will have activity that could potentially destabilize and distract a government from focusing on the important things such as recovering the economy and keeping our citizens safe. So, Mr. Speaker, when we were confronted, therefore, with the twin problem, keeping the people safe, recovering the economy, and then figuring out how to treat with the notion of an election, I was very early saying that we would not contemplate an election until we have seen where we have put in place the measures to secure the economic recovery of the citizens, and when I feel satisfied that we have the measures in place as well to continue the proper management of the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we are at that point, and now it is time. We have seen So, Mr. Speaker, we have looked at the economic outturns. No doubt, by the close of the financial year, we will be probably seeing growth taking a negative hit. Could be in the region of 5%. But, Mr. Speaker, what I'm satisfied with is that our private sector has been fully mobilized, and they have participated in the solutions. And they themselves, Mr. Speaker, are very eager to get on with the business of recovery. So, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt in my mind that Jamaica will recover stronger. I have no doubt in my mind that we will build back stronger. I have no doubt in my mind that under this administration, in partnership with the people of Jamaica, in unity and continuity, we will achieve the prosperity in the new Jamaica that we all want to see. With that in mind, Mr. Speaker, I have advised the Governor General, in accordance with Section 64(5) of the Constitution, to dissolve Parliament on Thursday, August 13, 2020. Acting on my advice, the Governor General is expected to take the necessary steps required by Section 64(1) of the Constitution to dissolve the Parliament by proclamation. I now further advise, in exercise of the powers conferred upon me by Section 21(1) of the Representation of the People Act, the following notice is hereby given. 1. This notice may be cited as the Representation of the People Act, Appointment of Nomination Day, Notice 2020. And 2. Tuesday, the 18th day of August 2020 is appointed as Nomination Day. This notice has been gazetted today, Tuesday, the 11th day of August 2020. Consequently, the date fixed for the taking of the polls, that is the general elections for the year 2020, is therefore Thursday, September the 3rd, 2020. Mr. Speaker, we will be quick. We will be efficient. We will be peaceful. And I raise this issue here in Parliament. This government, under my leadership, seeks no confrontation with any other political party. Mr. Speaker, this must be the most peaceful election. We are having an election in a pandemic. I know that both parties' representatives have met, and I'm hoping that shortly the protocols which are developed by the Ministry of Health, finalized by both political parties. Once that is done, then I will place them in the Disaster Risk Management Act as orders, which means consequences will flow for breaches. It is very difficult. I have been on the road. I have seen it. I take this opportunity to appeal to supporters of both political parties that it is important that politics does not become a cause of the spread. So, the kind of campaign to which we are accustomed may not be the campaign that will materialize. So if you don't get your hug or your wave or your squeeze or, you know, all the things that make Jamaican politics so exciting and thrilling, don't feel no way. Because there are persons who may not appreciate immediately that we have to campaign in a different way. So, Mr. Speaker, it is all a new time for us with new measures that have to be in place. But I'm certain that on both sides, the political capital and will exist to ensure that the campaign is done according to the agreed upon measures. So, Mr. Speaker, I have decided to announce the elections here in Parliament because it is important that this House, which is the People's House, though divided by an aisle, is not a house of disunity. And in a time of crisis, unity must prevail. So, Mr. Speaker, I am coming to the House asking that we are united as a country. We go to elections, but we must always bear in mind now, united to fight the pandemic. And I therefore use this platform to appeal to the Jamaican people. Let us remain united. Let us remain as one people. There is always differences in opinion, and you have in your democracy the right to vote as you choose. But you can do so agreeably, peacefully, and responsibly. Let us do it together as one people, as we march on to prosperity in the new Jamaica that we all want to see. God bless Jamaica, land we love.
Order, please. The House is still in session. Dr. Philip.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I trust that the Prime Minister's injunction that we are in a house that can find some unity and respect for each other in speaking will be observed. Let me begin by saying that we on this side welcome the announcement of to give the people a chance to exercise their judgment on the stewardship of the country. At the outset, I want to pay tribute to those who have made a decision not to return. I want to pay respects to the member for Northwest St. Catherine, to the member for South St. James, to the member for Southwest Clarendon, to you, I believe, Mr. Speaker, who from North Central Clarendon, who has taken the decision not to return, and to the member from North East St. Catherine, who has also taken a decision despite his relatively tender years. The member from Central Kingston, who is not here, and the member from North East St. Elizabeth. I'm certain I speak for all the House, all the members of this House, when I say that we all wish them well and pay tribute to them for their service to the people of this country over the years that they have served. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has given an account of the past 4.5 years. But for completeness, it would have been good if he had pointed out that compared to what the administration of 2012 inherited, he inherited a very different and a more positive environment from the previous people. It would have been good when he was touting the South Coast Highway to acknowledge that the planning for that began. He only had to take it in the previous administration. It would have been good when he spoke about Hagley Park Road and Constant Spring Road and the 3 miles and Mandela, that work was initiated, planned in the previous administration. It would have been good if he had acknowledged that the trend for the reduction in unemployment began in the previous administration. It would have been good also if he had acknowledged that we had received a debt-to-GDP ratio from the administration of 27 to 2011, of which he was a part, of in excess of 140% of GDP, and that when we transferred, using the current calculation, it was 109% of GDP. And that meant a very different environment. Yet, Mr. Speaker, despite all of that, in all the major challenges that this country has faced, the administration has not succeeded. In fact, it has failed. Crime, which we discussed earlier, has worsened. Crime, there are 12% more murders. If we take this year's numbers at August 7th, 784 murders. Annualized at the same rate, we would have 1,360 plus murders. That would be worse than the worst year in the previous administration without state sacrifices. The government has taken, we had on average, the JCF strength in the previous administration was 11,890. The establishment is 14,000. There has been no increase in the establishment despite the levels of crime. None of the measures to reform and transform the JCF, to modernize the framework of legislation, none of that in relation to crime control, apart from Zozo, has been undertaken. Mr. Speaker, they came in talking about 5 in 4 economic growth, set up the Economic Growth Council. I pay tribute to the members who tried their best. But the fact is there has been no growth. And even talking about this year and the effects of the pandemic, which are very real and has had an effect on the economy. Let us not forget that the economy started to decline in the last quarter, the quarter ending December 2019, which was 0% growth. It turned to negative for the quarter ending March 2020 before the pandemic had full effect, and it has now had full effect and is causing havoc in people's lives. And the evidence is not just in numbers, but if you look at the sugar industry, I remember when the now House leader had responsibility for agriculture and we were telling him about the problems of sugar.
A point of order, may I, Mr. Speaker? You know, we have to get our facts clear. The quarterly GDP for the quarter ending March 31st, 2020, registered a decline as compared with March 2019. All of Jamaica will know that the WHO declared a pandemic on the 10th or 11th of March in 2020, which led to a shutdown of our international airports, which, wait, the same courtesy that you were given,
Order, please.
That led to a complete shutdown of our airports and an emptying of our hotel rooms. Tourism for that quarter declined by...
Members, please. Have a seat, Mr. Bunting. Have a seat, please.
This is a point of order because the member is making a point to say that the decline that was registered for the quarter ended March 2020 started before the pandemic. That is currently untrue. Tourism declined by 14% in March 2020 because of the shutdown of the tourism industry in March due to the pandemic. We will not allow the member to get away with such nonsense. And I will remain... I'm not stopping. Mr. Speaker, I need your protection. We will not allow this misinformation to go on. Tourism declined by 12% in March 2020 because of a complete collapse of the tourism industry due to the pandemic. And no matter what they say, they cannot change that fact. They cannot make up their own facts. We will not allow them to do it. We will not allow them to do it. We're going to voting, and we will not allow them. We will fact check them on every single point that they try to raise. We're letting them know they will not get away with saying things that are inaccurate.
Dr. Phillips, let me just make a correction. Please, members. It's late in the term. Order, please. However, I don't think you want me to adjourn the House, but I can do that still. Dr. Phillips was making a point, and the member sought an intervention. Dr. Phillips must be permitted to continue his presentation.
I've heard what you have said.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Phillips, just before you proceed, Dr. Clark was seeking to have a correction of your presentation.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order, please.
Mr. Speaker.
Did you accept what he was saying?
No.
No.
Mr. Speaker. The
Dr.
member.
Clark, you'll be permitted to explain further when he is finished. But you do not intervene unless you seek
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member does not deny.
Members, let's finish the term.
Well, hello. Look here, man. I never interrupted. No matter how holy inaccuracies. Keep yourself quiet. Keep yourself quiet. Mr. Speaker, the member does not deny what was occurring in the quarter that ended December, that it was slowing down. And he's referring to the last 3 weeks of March to explain the results of the entire March quarter. He's showing incredulity. Mr. Speaker, you will have plenty time between Northwest, St. Andrew, and anywhere else you want to go to make your case. Mr.
Speaker,
and I am not going to yield. No, I am not going to.
I am not making the case that what I'm saying is that tourism is 10% of the economy, and tourism declined by 14% on account of the shutdown of the entire industry in March. And that's the only point that I'm making.
That's an explanation. The simple fact, Mr. Speaker, is that the economy moved to negative at the end of March. That is a fact which you acknowledge, and that is a fact that I am restating here. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the critical sectors of the economy, like export agriculture, when we look at the sugar industry, it has been a litany of failures and disaster that has occurred. And I tell you more, Mr. Speaker. Westmoreland, the collapse of sugar is directly related to the upsurge of crime. Clarendon, the collapse of sugar directly related to the upsurge of crime. And now we have a situation, St. Thomas, sugar demolished. And up to now, we have heard nothing about what is going to cause its revival. Mr. Speaker, and when we look at governance, when we look at the misuse, and I dare say the downright theft of public resources, taxpayers' money. This has been the worst experience that Jamaica has ever had. 2 ministers of government resigned, others with a shadow over them. And some of those with the shadow remain in the cabinet. That has imperiled Jamaica's reputation not in the international community and not only here. And then, we have had the promises which have been broken. We are told that one is to come 4.5 years after, fixed election date. There are difficulties, nothing happened. We were told of the minimum wage doubling. Yes. What has happened? We were told of job descriptions for ministers, unless it has a description of how to misuse public funds. We don't know what the job description is. Bauxite alumina collapse. Bauxite workers having their difficulties and suffering. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the polls will show on the day what they will show, and that the people of Jamaica will make a determination as to whether this lack of integrity, lack of governance, and failure to deal with the major challenges of Jamaican society deserves another term. Because it is true, one good term deserves another, but this has not been a good term for the people of Jamaica.
It's a prison term.
Mr. Speaker, what? Mr. Speaker, we all recognize that we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I want to say at the outset that we on this side are committed to conducting ourselves in a campaign that takes account of the priority need to protect the lives of the Jamaican people, even as we contest elections. But I think we should recognize equally, as we face the fact of the pandemic, that there is much that should be done by the government to help staunch, reduce the spike, the second wave that is now upon us. And I speak of simple things that I believe the government would recognize. For example, there is need for better screening at our airports and ports. Every one of us inside here, I presume, would have heard the tales, and I have had direct contact with people who have come into the airports.
And you're not in quarantine?
And they are, no, direct. I said, Prime Minister, even you would know better than that, because communication and contact don't involve physical contact. But you have people who have come in, who have left, who did testing and they left before they got any result. You have had people who have been in quarantine, were told that they were going to get contact from the Ministry of Health. Nothing has happened. I want to urge that the government move immediately to improve the screening taking place at our ports and airports. And we can put the people in place, even those graduates that didn't get a chance to get a job at JUTC. We could use them to be part of a team, to join with the Ministry of Health workers, to be out there assisting in the screening process. There is need to monitor the quarantines. Relying just on the word of people that they're going to self-quarantine won't get us as far as we need to go. They have to protect the rest of the nation. We need to monitor the quarantine, the houses and the communities, and we need to monitor public compliance with the rules. I had an experience, again, no direct contact. Drove up beside a taxi. Had 6 people in it, small, what they call them, the box, the pro box. One person had a mask, and it wasn't the driver. And so, even having monitoring of those taxis and buses privately operated, I believe JUTC has been observing from what I am told. But we need to monitor it because the community spread eventually will get everyone involved. And we can do better, Mr. Speaker. We can do better. As a country, we can do better. We need to monitor the compliance at the parties and the places, not just have them put up their signs, Minister, but actually have the teams trained by the Ministry of Health. Trained by the Ministry of Health, doing the monitoring. And of course, I want to suggest again that we bring into the network of testing. We need to do more testing, especially now that we're going to be reopening the schools. We need to pay attention there. This is the future of the country. Those children going are our future, the country's future. We need to strengthen it, and we need to recruit the qualified private sector laboratories to be part of the network doing the tests and the rapid tests. And most of all, I want to say that the public education program needs to be enhanced. I don't just mean the TV and radio ads, whoever organized them. But I mean in going into the communities, meeting with the transport workers, meeting in the communities with the community people involved, going to the workplaces and building this awareness of the serious challenge that we now face. We have had a massive increase over the last 4 days. The actual numbers that we have, 95 cases in 4 days. Hospitalizations are up, active cases and deaths are up. So I want to say that on the basis of the record, this 4.5 years has left a lot to be desired. Some things have been done, without doubt. From a platform which was left, which was a more propitious platform, a solid foundation. Now we're going to be called upon to rescue the country again in the areas of economic growth, in the areas of crime control, and to set up the proper digital economy. There is nothing worse now than the service of our mobile system and providers. And we have too many areas still, despite having the universal access fund, that are not accessible to the internet. Mr. Speaker, we on this side are committed to building that Jamaica, building Jamaica, building everybody's Jamaica, without first-class and second-class citizens. A Jamaica where you don't have to be You don't have to have links to get a work at JUTC or anywhere else. At Jamaica, where the people will be able to do what they want. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to building a better Jamaica on behalf of the people of this country. So bring it on. Prime Minister, is that what you say, sir?
Prime Minister, before you proceed, we have to seek permission to proceed beyond 7:20. I'm going to ask Mr. Semuda for the resolution. Order, please.
Mr. Speaker, the time being 7:20, I move that time for Parliament sitting be extended beyond 7:30 to enable the House to finish the work of the day.
Those in favour? Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, let me join with the Leader of the Opposition in acknowledging the work and service of those members of this House who will not be returning, not by virtue of a defeat in an election, but they have decided not to seek re-election. Mr. Speaker, I believe, I stand to be corrected, that this would be the first time that an election is announced in the House. Not the first? I think so. I was looking and I didn't see any other precedent. I believe it is the first. And Mr. Speaker, I think, however, it does give the nation the opportunity to see the platforms together, the debate, what the platforms are proposing, and I think it is good that it is done this way and good for our democracy. I wish to say that the presentation of the Leader of the Opposition, I have never been known for not giving credit where it is due. So, yes, it was a good presentation by a Leader of the Opposition. My take on it, however, is that we can't argue a point as if there was never a beginning. Yes, there is always a beginning for something. So, no, that's not the point. The point is, you have to argue what you did with the beginning. My government has taken the baton and we have ran a very good leg. We have made up time lost and we have put Jamaica in pole position for victory. We have put Jamaica in pole position for achieving the prosperity that the people are looking for. If I were, Mr. Speaker, if I were to follow the Leader of the Opposition, then I would start to go back in history. The Leader of the Opposition said, we did not give credit to them for the South Coast Highway. Mr. Speaker, do you know when the South Coast Highway idea started and by who? 1964. You could trace it back to 1964. But when it was actually studied was in 2008. Was in 2008. Study commissioned by then Minister of Finance, member for North East Manchester, asking the IDB to study. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that there was ever any contest in this House about the record of the opposition. I run on my record and what we have achieved. Mr. Speaker, let that be clear. That, Mr. Speaker, is what the people want to hear. I don't spend time criticizing the opposition. I don't spend time poring over their records. I spend time, Mr. Speaker, telling the people of Jamaica.
Order, please.
You know, I was very gracious to the Leader of the Opposition. So, Mr. Speaker, we run on our record. And I believe that the people of Jamaica will make the right judgment about the record of this government. So, Mr. Speaker, I will see you at the polls.
Order, please. Members, please keep your seat.
Mr. Speaker.
We are not yet finished with Parliament. Go ahead, Mr.
Mr.
Senator.
Speaker, in the midst of all of this debate, I kept hearing sounds and I saw images of it yesterday. Shut up. Shut up. Talking about sweep them out. But Mr. Speaker, you and I have been around long enough to know that the last time they used that was when Sir Donald Sangster beat on a backside in 1972.
Order, please.
In
Members,
1967,
please.
when Sir Donald Sangster went on a come with this like old tired, they walk out, get out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the House be adjourned.
Mr. Samuel, please. Order, please.
Go it.
Members, the Speaker is standing. Mr. Samuda.
Are ill-mannered.
Mr. Samuda,
And you're
please.
going to get a beating in the election to show you how to be mannered.
Order, please.
Ill-mannered.
Mr. Samuda, please.
Sit down.
Members, Dr. Phillips. Dr. Phillips. I don't want it to be said that on the last night we've been watched around the world, and the demonstration that we wish to give for our years here is not a happy one. I'm standing because I want to say thanks to members of Parliament. I have served this Parliament since 1980, except for a period of time. I have started from the backbench to the cabinet to the Speaker's house. We have had rough times and soft times. And I need to say, yes, politics is not always as soft as people think. But I want to say to both sides, I wish you good luck. I wish you good luck to continue the people's business. And as the Prime Minister said, the people of Jamaica will make the choice once and for all. And I say thanks, and I understand we're going to have more women in the Parliament the next time. Prime Minister, I want to say thanks. I want to say thanks to you for asking me to be Speaker of the House. And I want to say thanks to Dr. Phillips for accepting. It's no greater feeling than starting 2 terms in the KCAC, 2 terms in the Senate, and 7 terms in the House of Representatives, which includes 4 times selected for a cabinet post. And I want to say to all of you, the people must come first. The people must come second. The people must be at all times. I want to say to the cabinet, to the staff of Parliament, to those in the news area who have done well, and to those who do the documentation, and to that lady that does sign. I want to say thanks. Please let us leave here on friendly terms and let the people decide in their own opinion who have done well and who they wish to continue serving them in this parliament. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I now, if I could only get to speak, I now invite you to dissolve this house.
Adjourn.
No, to adjourn this house.
Adjourn.
Adjourn
Sign
this
that.
house.
No, sign.
Sign it, aye. Sign it, aye. That's the most polite thing you have said all day. What? What? We will adjourn this house for a date to be fixed, Mr. Speaker.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it. This honorable house now stands adjourned